Cloud storage is something I personally couldn't live without, and while I prefer to run my own network storage solution, there's no shortage of providers such as Amazon, Google, or Dropbox for you to store your files on. But is it something that could benefit from decentralization? Stick around and let's talk about it. Hey guys, I'm Sprag, and as more and more things become digitized, it's becoming increasingly important to have a central backup location for all of our files. Because of this, Sia believes that the redundancy and security of our files should be handled best by a decentralized platform. Sia was first conceptualized in 2013 by David Vorick and Luke Champagne. In an article, the two stated their reason for starting Sia was because they got caught in the startup mindset and wanted to create a product. Looking at chains in the crypto space, almost every single one of them uses decentralization as a selling point. After all, that is the entire reason that Bitcoin was created in the first place. But the problem is, there's a lot of different ways you can actually quantify decentralization. For example, it's widely agreed that if a company has any sort of major control over a node or a network, then it's centralized. Or if the entire network hinges on a master node run by the parent company, or a selected partner of the parent company, then it would also be centralized. But there's a far more subtle version of centralization that I personally think is a greater problem, and this is development centralization. Take Cardano for example. A few months back, Cardano released a blog post saying that they had created their first fully decentralized block. But was this actually true? Peer review in the wider world has started to fall out of favor in the scientific community. Since as early as 2006, people have been poking holes in it and realizing that actually it's based more on bias and trust than anything else. But Cardano's entire philosophy is based around peer review, and the problem is when you have as prominent a figure as Charles Hoskinson leading the project. This means that any proposition made by the IOHK is likely to get put through regardless of whether or not it's the actual best way to do things, just because people have faith that the IOHK know what they're doing. To me, this is still centralization. In reality, if Charles Hoskinson left the project tomorrow, would it actually still be as popular as it is now? Personally, I don't feel it would be. But Cardano isn't the only chain with this problem. The only difference is that due to the peer review nature of Cardano, it's more highlighted by it. But in the same vein, if Vitalik was to suddenly leave Ethereum, I would argue that it would also lose some of its public popularity. Seeing these issues, the Sia Foundation have made sure that it is baked into the protocol from the ground up to be fully decentralized and not require any sort of development input from them at all, even though by their own admission this does actually make some aspects of their chain harder to use. Launching in 2015 with 0 servers owned by the Sia Foundation, the philosophy from the start has always been that if the Sia Foundation was to just suddenly disappear, the Sia network could still continue unaffected. This adamance to never rely on any sort of centralized data is the reason that they will not actually use something like an oracle to make sure that the prices for the hosting is stable, or try to make a list of the best and worst hosts on the network. This to some might seem like a negative, because what other hosts can do very easily, Sia will never be able to do. However, this is just the cost of true decentralization. This is also why all new versions of the node software must be compatible with all older versions of the chain, so that if a node provider isn't happy with a change that has been made, they just don't have to accept it. Due to the fact that Sia is an older coin, it is still using proof of work. However, they have no intention of switching to proof of stake, as they have defended their choice of proof of work on many occasions and just agree that the security of it is far higher than with proof of stake. And I will have a dedicated video to the in-depth differences between proof of work and proof of stake coming up in a future video, so if you're interested in that, hit the subscribe button down below. But David Vorick's justification for the use of proof of work is essentially this. When you think about the security in a proof of work chain, you can think about it kind of like a cost-benefit equation, where if we take a hypothetical chain where each block costs around $10,000 to produce, this means that if a bad actor came onto the network and wanted to change a block to double spend in it, they would have to spend $10,000 for every block that precedes that block up until the current block in time, whereby it would then become the known source of truth. This is completely independent of the hash rate too, because even if they had 99% of the hash rate on the network, they would still have to create all of these blocks to catch up with the main chain, costing them $10,000 per block. This means that proof of work is kind of like a verifiable stamp of this is secure, and means that the potential attack rewards needs to be more more than the sum cost of recreating all the blocks from that one up until the current one. Now, this means that an attacker would need to ensure that the amount of money that they are standing to gain from double spending is greater than the amount that they will spend trying to recreate the chain, but they will also need to have more than 51% of the total network's hash rate. This is because if that new fork that they have created by double spending cannot catch up with the main one, then it will never be accepted as the source of truth. And the only way to catch up with the main fork would be to solve the cryptographic problems required to mint a new block faster than the main one can. And finally, the SIA Foundation actually played an active role in bringing ASICs to their chain, making sure that the only people who are willing to actually mine on the chain are willing to buy expensive machinery to do so. Let's say you have a proof of work chain that is ASIC proof, meaning that anyone with a GPU can mine on it. There is nothing stopping someone from mining that chain or a different chain that also supports GPU mining, but also reselling their GPU. This means that in theory, someone could just buy enough GPUs to perform a double spend and overtake the network's hash rate. This would hurt the price of our hypothetical coin. However, they can then just reuse those GPUs to either mine another coin or sell them off and get the resale value. Now let's take ASICs. ASICs work on a single coin. This means that an attacker would not only need to make sure that the cost of the attack offsets the cost of recreating all the blocks, but also offsets the cost of all the ASICs they've purchased. Because as soon as public favor for that coin goes down after they hear that there has been an attack, those ASICs will become almost worthless. In the case of SIA, the current network hash as of writing this video is 13 petahash per second. This means that for an attacker to overtake the rest of the network, they themselves need to have at least 13 petahash per second. So, using the Obelisk SC1 ASIC miner, which currently costs around $3,000 and is created by SIA's sister company Obelisk, we would need 16,000 of these ASICs just to match the network hash rate, which is a frosty $48 million. So this means that an attack would need to return $48 million plus the cost of recreating all of the blocks between our attack and the current block, and then still make more than that to make some profit. So while I think this actually is a genuine argument for why they should use proof of work, I think the second argument as to why they shouldn't is harder to dispel. The environmental impact of proof of work chains is just too high. And the problem is that when you take something like Bitcoin, you can say, well, it's trying to replace gold, and as such would be replacing the energy used by the mining and processing of gold. The problem is the same can't be said for SIA. In the case of SIA, the servers being used to provide hosting are on 24/7, which is no different than how it used to be. However, now we're adding increased negative impacts because of the mining aspect. To this, the only real argument that you can use in response is that SIA does encourage the recycling of old technology such as old hard drives to provide storage to the network, which is a good use of older tech. Going into the cloud storage on SIA, they focus on three things: decentralization, redundancy, and security. In terms of decentralization, every file that's uploaded to the SIA network is first broken into 30 segments using Reed-Solomon erasure coding. This is the same thing that Sol uses to break down its blocks for transfer across the network. More on that here. Once broken into 30 pieces, all of those pieces are then sent to a different host on the network. But the beauty of the Reed-Solomon erasure coding is that 20 of these 30 hosts could disappear from the network forever, and the user's data could still be completely recreated from just the 10 that remain. This is how SIA actually manages to achieve decentralization and redundancy in a single move. And from a security point of view, this isn't just in terms of file security, but also making sure that the host and the renter have each other's best interest in mind. From the point of view of file security, before being sent from the user's PC, every single one of the 30 segments is first encrypted. This means that even if a host was compromised, nothing could be gained from the data that they've stolen. In terms of agreement security, all space renting is done via smart contracts. This allows both parties to agree on a set of terms such as contract length, uptime commitment, and price. On top of this, at the end of the contract period, the hoster must prove that they do actually still contain the segment of the file they say they do, and if they don't, the SC that they put up as collateral will be burnt. Moving on from cloud storage, however, and onto SKYNET, which is something that the SIA Foundation have called an extension or layer 2 on top of the SIA cloud storage platform. The SKYNET platform allows developers to upload sites or files through portals and then have them pinned on the SKYNET network. This means that anyone can then access that content just like they would a regular site. This sort of makes SKYNET comparable to AWS's S3 buckets or CDNs, where any of the static files or client-driven files that are uploaded there can be accessible like a normal web page. This is currently SKYNET Labs, formerly SIA Foundation's primary focus in trying to make a decentralized internet. The Genesis block for SIA contained 300,000 SC, with every subsequent block then containing one less SC per block minted. This then decreased all the way down to a floor of 30,000 SC, which happened on the 28th of July 2020. Currently there is 48,847,000,000 SC coins in circulation. However, due to the fact that SiaCoin is a utility coin first and foremost, this means that there is no max supply and as such is inflationary. However, there is the burning effect that I mentioned earlier, and future plans to implement proof of burn. To get a potential upside for SIA, we have to look at its largest competitor in the decentralized internet space, ICP. So if we use the market cap from ICP in our calculation, we get an upside of 923%, bringing the cost of one SC to 19 cents. However, I do have a few major concerns for this platform. My first concern is liability. If someone uploads illegal content onto the SKYNET platform, who is actually liable for that content? Is it just the user or is it the host as well? In almost all cases of illegal content being hosted on the regular internet, the authorities don't just go after the uploader, they also go after the people hosting it. The problem in a decentralized platform is there's no central entity that you can actually blame for that. And so would they go after the individual hosts instead? And if that is the case, what protection will there be for hosts given that they have no idea what's being stored on their machines? My second concern is just the general pivot into the decentralized internet space. As much as I would love to see a breaking of the dependency on big cloud compute platforms, it's almost becoming a fad that chains come out and say they are going to be the next internet. And this, in my opinion, is made worse by the fact that in the same way no one has ever looked at a Tor URL and gone, that seems really easy to remember, no one is ever going to look at a SiaSky URL that they've seen before and actually remember what was on there, meaning that there is going to need to be central repositories to archive all these links. Now, I understand that you can use handshake name servers to give your site an actual URL. The problem is this is far less convenient than the existing DNS system that we have on the surface web, which is something that ICP already hooks into. And leading on from that, my third concern is that SKYNET does nothing to justify its own existence. With the cloud storage platform, it was easy to see the benefits. People could start hosting even on older hardware, and from a user's point of view, they could get cloud storage for incredibly cheap prices. SKYNET, however, just lets you host your website, but in a less convenient way, and make it so that your website can only be client-side only. Chains like ICP allow users to run backends for their websites either in the same canister or in a different canister. However, SKYNET does not have this functionality. This makes SKYNET kind of more like Geo or NeoCities, where all you can really do is host static web content or client-side code. And finally, due to the not wanting to depend on an oracle, means that there is no way to keep the price of hosting stable. This means the profit from actually hosting on the SIA network is entirely dependent on the coin's current price, and means that the hosts have to keep constantly changing their prices to reflect what the real world cost of one SC is. This also has the complete opposite effect on the user. Let's say that a user has committed to spending 248 SC on 3 months worth of hosting. This would roughly work out to be $5 for 3 months worth of hosting at the current price. But now let's say that in those 3 months, the price of one SC suddenly goes up to 4 cents. Well, now they've paid $11 for the same 3 months of hosting by the time their contract has ended, meaning they've actually ended up paying double what they had expected to pay at the start. And just as a little side note at the end here, when you go through the SKYNET App Store directory, the official one, so many of the sites are dead that it is just not a very good look for the chain. So while I hope the SIA does achieve its goals, and to be honest, I more think that it will achieve in the cloud storage side of things rather than SKYNET, this is a chain I would have to give a few more years to mature before I'd be confident actually putting any money into. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like and a comment down below. If you disagree with anything that I've said in this video and you can actually back up the claim, then leave it down below as well, because I'm always happy to take criticism. And if you just generally enjoy my content, please do consider subscribing. Thanks, bye.